express myself.
Self-care is all about prioritizing me time.
I practice self-care by choosing to use a long-term birth control called an IUD to prevent pregnancy.
Hello, I'm Christy Cade with the White Ribbon Alliance.
And I'm Cindy Garson, Coalition Director of the Self-Care Trailblazer Group. We are thrilled to welcome you to the Self-Care Learning and Discovery Series. We are a global coalition dedicated to ensuring everyone practices self-care. We advance self-care advocacy, evidence, practice, and learning to support people meeting their own health goals and to strengthen health systems.
The World Health Organization defines self-care as the ability of individuals, families, and communities to promote health, prevent disease, maintain health, and to cope with illness and disability with or without the support of a healthcare provider. The series has invited more than 50 organizers from around the world to share what self-care means to them in practice through 16 individual sessions. While each session examines self-care through a unique lens, they are very much connected. We encourage you to participate in as many as possible.
The Discovery Series is open to everyone: advocates and activists, healthcare providers, government officials, program implementers, community members, because all of us should have a vested interest in self-care. We hope you share your own ideas and insights throughout the series and keep the conversation going by becoming a member of the Self-Care Trailblazer Group. We'd like to thank the members of the Self-Care Learning and Discovery Series Steering Committee: Advanced Family Planning, JPIGO, PATH, Population Services International, and most of all, White Ribbon Alliance. Without you, this learning opportunity would not be possible.
We also want to thank all of the session organizers who have dedicated their time voluntarily to curate this event. We should also say that each of the organizers took on the responsibility of the content in individual sessions, and so they might not necessarily reflect the views of the steering committee. Please take what you learned today and apply it to advancing policies, programs, and practices that enable self-care, universal health coverage, and your own individual health and well-being. Now, without further ado, we turn it over to today's session organizers. Thank you.
Thank you and enjoy.
All right. Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are coming from the world. Welcome to Self-Care Everywhere, Innovative Approaches to Achieving Sexual and Reproductive Health and Rights in Humanitarian and Fragile Settings. It's my pleasure to be co-moderating and co-organizing with Erin Wheeler. I'm Rupan Gill, Executive Director and co-founder of Vitala Global Foundation, and will be co-moderating as well as co-facilitating one of the breakout sessions. Erin?
Hi, everyone. My name is Erin Wheeler, and I'm the Senior Technical Advisor for Sexual and Reproductive Health and Rights at the International Rescue Committee. And I'm really thrilled to be here today to talk about this important topic.
It's really been a labor of love over the last, I guess, couple of months in organizing this. So it was myself and Erin, but as well as with many of our colleagues from IWAG, which we also want to acknowledge as co-organizers for today's exciting event. So we have a really great program ahead with a roundtable panel that will be followed by a number of breakout sessions that we hope that will allow us as a group to really get at why it is that we need self-care in these settings. What does self-care success look like in humanitarian and fragile settings? And what is the value add of self-care in humanitarian settings? Next slide, please. So before we get into some of the fun stuff, we just were hoping that people could just write in the chat where you're from, what organization, what country, just so that we can get to know each other a little better. So there's just an opportunity to do that, just giving a hello and sort of what you're looking forward to for this session. Next slide. So there are a few housekeeping things that we would like to make sure that you're all aware of. So first and foremost, we do have simultaneous translation for the event today, predominantly in the main plenary session. So you can select your preferred language channel, which is English, French, Spanish. Reminder that this meeting is being recorded. Please keep yourself muted unless you're speaking. And you can use the chat box if you have a question or you would like to build upon a point that is made. Raise your hand or your digital hand when you would like to speak during the breakout room sessions. And of course, stay curious, stay engaged. And yeah, we're really looking forward to this dialogue and conversation together. Next slide, please. All right, so just to get us going, I thought we would just start us off with a little quiz to test your knowledge about humanitarian settings. And so we're doing it as a Slido, so you can see that there's a QR code here, as well as the website. So all of you have a phone or a computer, so you can, pick that up and just join at slido.com, or you can just click on use the QR code and put in the code number 568905. So you have access to our live quiz. So it looks like we're just getting people's names in here. It's a good test just to make sure you're connected to the Slido. Perfect. We'll give it a few moments for people to just. It's really great to see that we have about 140 participants so far. So. Okay, great. Let's get started. So next slide, we have our first question. Approximately how many people live in humanitarian settings? Is it A, 3 million, B, 82 million, C, or I guess the third dot, 168 million, or the final one, 1 billion? Give a few moments to allow all of you to answer that question. I do see some people are answering in the chat as well, which is great. But if you can connect to the Slido as well, that would be wonderful. So then we can see. It seems like we have about 46 people who've already answered. I'll give it a few more moments to get a few more people answering. All right, so we have 50 people, so that have answered, and the final answer. So majority of you said the right one, which is 168 million. We did get some that were saying 1 million, I think, in the chat. Maybe that'll happen one day, maybe not, hopefully not. So more than 82 million people have been forcibly displaced, among whom approximately 48 million are internally displaced and 26 million are refugees. So excellent job for the majority who got 168 million. Next question. So what factors make health program implementation different in humanitarian and fragile settings compared to stable settings? So in this question, you can select all that apply. So is it insecurity poses risks to implementers, stakeholders, and clients? Sexual and reproductive health is less of a priority in these settings because food and shelter are more important. Disrupted health systems make ensuring access more difficult. Weak or non-existent policies, systems, and rule of law create confusion and added risk. Government actors may be perpetrators of or complicit in violence. Saving lives may take precedence over system strengthening goals. Operational constraints may pose as great of a challenge as programmatic or technical issues. So select all that apply in terms of what makes it different in humanitarian and fragile settings. Just giving a few more moments as we also have the simultaneous interpretation. So for those folks that are logged in, listening in Spanish and French. So again, for those of you who have just logged in and joined us, we're just doing a Slido quiz, so you can join us at slido.com and the code is there, or via the QR code. So actually, I've seen that there's quite a few people who've said all of them, but it's actually all except the sexual and reproductive health is less of a priority in these settings because food and shelter are more important. Everything else does make it different in terms of health program implementation. But what would be really great and interesting is just to hear some people's thoughts, or to share your thoughts in the chat with regards to some other factors that might make it different for implementation in humanitarian and fragile settings. And just one thought is why the second one, that it's not unique just to humanitarian, because even in development settings and other settings, sexual and reproductive health can become less of a priority. And we've seen that during COVID, when it's in, I mean, COVID-19 also has been its own humanitarian crisis, but just in terms of various different programs and implementation projects that are out there, it's not always that it's solely in humanitarian settings that SRH is less of a priority. So we'd love to see, just put in some other thoughts in the chat with regards to other factors that might have come up for you, and share that with one another. So I'll give folks an opportunity. You can share, but we all move on to the next question. I do see, yeah, other forms of constraints such as social or cultural. And Kubri SSR is a high priority. All right, so our next question. So which of the following are part of the minimum initial services package for sexual and reproductive health in emergencies, also known as the MISP? So select all that apply again. Identify a lead organization for the MISP. Assess the culture and preferences of the affected population to identify which SRH services to make available. Prevent sexual violence and respond to the needs of survivors. Prevent transmission and reduce morbidity and mortality from HIV and STIs. Prevent excess maternal and neonatal mortality. Prevent unintended pregnancies. Plan for comprehensive SRH services. Facilitate access to safe abortion care to the full extent of the law. So again, select all that apply. And then also for those of you who've joined us, just again, a reminder, we're doing a Slido quiz here. So you can join at slido.com. The code is 568-905, and we have the QR code as well that you can use from your telephone. And also for those of you who are just joining in, just introduce yourself in the chat, where you're from, what country, what organization, just so we can all get to know each other.
Hello. morning, good afternoon, everyone. Sorry I joined late. This is Edwin from IRC in Sierra Leone.
Hi, Edwin. Welcome. Thank you. So I'm looking for a few more answers here. It looks like we have 45.
Hi everyone, I am Herbert from Cameroon.
Thank you. If you can introduce yourselves on the chat, that would be best, but we are really enjoying hearing everyone's voices too. It's just a bit more challenging because we do have quite a few people logged on. Who's going to be that 50th person who's answering these questions? Awesome. All right. So let's see what the answers are here. So it's actually all of them. And majority of you got it. So it's all of them except for assess the culture and preferences of the affected population to identify which SRH services to make available. And so what I would like to share is that the MISP is the minimum package of sexual and reproductive health services that should be made available at the onset of all acute emergencies. The services that must be made available do not differ by context. These are services that people need everywhere. And it was written in the chat earlier that SRH is essential as a life-saving and critical services in humanitarian settings. However, the MISP describes what to do, not how to do it. And that's a very critical point, since approaches to implementation are what can often differ by context. So therefore, it's important. Therefore, it's an important opportunity for self-care to support implementers to really fulfill MISP objectives. It's also important to note that even in a humanitarian setting, comprehensive sexual and reproductive health services should be made available as soon as possible and ideally within 3 to 6 months. Great job, everyone. That was great just to get us going. And it does look like this is quite a well-informed group in terms of humanitarian settings. So I'd like to just move us along now. Next slide. So in terms of the next part of the program, it is actually going to be our panel that is going to be moderated by my co-moderator, Erin Wheeler, who I'll introduce. As she did state, she is the Senior Technical Advisor for Sexual and Reproductive Health and Rights with IRC, and she's also a very active member of the Interagency Working Group for Reproductive Health and Crises, and co-chair of the Safe Abortion Care Sub-Working Group. On to you, Erin, for our panel.
Thanks so much, Yapan, and thanks everyone for joining. I know there have been a couple of questions in the chat about the posters. Just give us a few moments and we're going to have a section on that, or we can make sure to share where you can access and engage with those posters. And for those of you who don't know, we've asked for poster submissions of specific examples of how self-care has been implemented in humanitarian settings. So this will be a really great opportunity to delve a little bit more deeply into these specific examples. So I'm really thrilled to be moderating this exciting panel today. So we have 4 panelists joining us. One is Sheena Curry, who is the Senior Maternal and Newborn Health Advisor at JPIGO. We were supposed to have Marta Royo, the Executive Director of Pro Familia in Colombia, with us today, but unfortunately she could not join at the last minute. But we are very grateful that Diana Moreno, who is the Director of Advocacy at Pro Familia in Colombia, will be joining us instead. We also have Faridah Luanda, who is a 23-year-old refugee from the Democratic Republic of Congo, currently resettled in Stockholm. She's also the GRIN Diversity and Gender Coordinator, and she's going to be sharing her both personal and professional experience with SRH and self-care. And last but certainly not least, we have Manisha Kumar from Médecins Sans Frontières. So without further ado, let's get started. So Diana, who's joined us this morning, I'm actually going to start with you. So I'd love to hear from your experience in Colombia, why you think it's important that we expand access to self-care for sexual and reproductive health, specifically in humanitarian settings.
Hi, Erin, and to everyone in the public. First of all, I want to excuse myself on behalf of Marta Royo for being unable to join us today. I hope we can still have a very interesting conversation. And I want to thank all the organizers for having us here. On regards to your question, I think Pro Familia during the last 4 or 5 years have been actively acting towards the attention of Venezuelan migrants in Colombia within a migratory humanitarian crisis. And in the research that we have made, when we analyze the inequalities for the access of health of this community, we find out that many of the things they are having more needs upon when it comes to the health attention, and especially when it comes to sexual and reproductive rights, are things that could in a way be prevented when we strengthen ways of self-care, collective care, primary care, or even family care. So what we think about is that having self-care actions could help these communities to have access to timely information regarding healthcare routes, to know the legal procedures under which they can exercise their rights, or even simply in an early way identifying diagnoses and practices that can protect them in an integral way. So self-care in those cases would allow undermining a series of risk factors, thus complementing the efforts carried out by humanitarian organizations, which not disappear as we are implemented self-care. They are more complementary than opposite. So its importance lies in the ability of communities to be actively aware of their well-being and to take action to generate and maintain it.
Great, thanks so much, Diana. Really important points just about how self-care can really provide a complementary option for service access, particularly for those refugees who may not have access to the formal health system. So this isn't an either or question, but rather something that expands the options available, that in turn creates more access, particularly for populations that historically lack access. So Faridah, now I'm going to turn to you. So we'd love to hear a little bit about you and your experience, and specifically based on this lived experience, why do you think it's important that we expand access to self-care for SRH?
Yeah, thank you, moderator. I'm not going to repeat my names. My name, as I've been mentioned, but I'm a survivor of SGBV, and at 13 years old, I was forced to marry a 35-year-old man. For me, I never saw my first menstruation cycle. I just saw my stomach coming big, and I realized that I was pregnant. At the age of 17, I became a widow after the father of my son got killed due to conflicts. And before that, at the age of 15, when I giving birth, I got a lot of complications. And that's how I fled to Uganda, where I united with my brother and started a vision group and One Touch Solar Studio, which makes songs with a social message. And then the vision group works to transform young refugees through music, dance, and drama, education, and livelihood activities in Chakatu refugee settlement. I've been teaching others how to make reusable sanitary pads, distributing condoms, and promoting sexual reproductive health in the community, self-care and self-protection for girls and young women. In humanitarian setting, and refugees are often in remote areas. There's a lot of poverty, which drives girls into early marriage and early pregnancy, and then they drop out of school and don't have skills to support themselves. When it comes to sexual and reproductive health, there's a huge gap. Self-care is the only opportunity for girls and women to own our bodies and to bring back our dignity. Self-care improves young people's lives, and many young girls, they don't understand menstruation. They get blood, but they don't know what it is. or how it can take care of themselves. Many girls don't have access to sanitary pads, and even those who have access to reusable sanitary pads don't get the right information to clean them. Without this information, bacteria get trapped in the reusable pads and they get UTIs. Others don't have pads at all. We still have a big stigma about menstruation. Girls worry that the blood could go on their clothes and they feel ashamed. So they drop out of school. This stigma about menstruation, the lack of information, and poverty can push young girls to sleep with men to overcome menstruation. They hear that if you go with a man, you will have no blood, but pregnancy stops them from going to school. And then they have a baby, but no skills to earn. A young person trying to get information about family planning faces a lot of challenges, especially in the refugee community. Maybe girl may forced to marry, or she's sexually active for another reason. A girl of 12 or 13 cannot approach a nurse or a doctor or even a senior teacher to get advice on protection. Even a girl of 15 or 16 cannot get family planning pills. First thing they will ask to the clinic, a young girl like you, how can you ask for a condom? What will you use a condom for? It is really intimidating. Young people cannot access pills, family planning, condoms, or even information, even if they are brave enough to go to a clinic to ask for a condom. They will have to pay money that they don't have. A young person cannot access even condoms, and that is why HIV spreads. Self-care can help young people who are HIV positive to know how to protect themselves and others instead of spreading the disease. And there are a lot of problems with pregnancy and delivery, especially for young girls who are in child marriage or who got raped. I delivered when I was 15 and I had a lot of complications. The body gets damaged and there is no help to fix it. This caused a lot of pain. There's no safe spaces for young people to get information about family planning, self-care, counseling, or help. For example, child mothers, they feel uncomfortable. Sometimes they have pain and problems. From the delivery, they don't feel like they fit in with the girls or with the women. They miss somehow who they can talk to and share their own stories. All young people need a place where they can feel safe and talk about their problems and get information about how to care for themselves. Self-care can reduce a big number of people waiting at the hospitals in the refugee communities. People go to the hospital to get information about family planning or sexual reproductive health problems, but there's a long wait or they get no information at all. Self-care can come in and they can get information or services in the community without going to the hospitals. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Faridah, for sharing that. It's really critical, I think, to hear about that personal experience. And also just that you really highlighted so many of the key barriers that many conflict-affected people face, but particularly adolescents when trying to access sexual and reproductive health services, which creates a really important opportunity to expand access through self-care approaches. So now I'm actually going to turn over to Manisha. Manisha, I'm hoping you could describe one way in which MSF is making self-care for SRH a reality for populations affected by humanitarian crises.
Sure. Hi, everybody. I just wanted to start off by saying thank you so much for having me. It's great to be having this discussion with all of you. And I'm honored to be able to share some of MSF experiences. Erin, I know you asked to share one way in which MSF is making self-care a reality, but our approach to this topic has kind of been to try lots of different initiatives all over the world. So we have a whole range of projects that we're trying. So we've started to do HIV self-testing in Eswatini, formerly known as Swaziland. We're doing cervical cancer self-screening in Zimbabwe. We have a project where we are piloting the self-injecting contraceptive Cyanopress in the Democratic Republic of Congo. We have projects working on community distribution of emergency contraception in Ethiopia. And of course, all over the world where we're providing safe abortion care, we are working and trying to see how we can move things further and further down the spectrum to a more self-managed models where we can really reduce barriers by reducing unnecessary tests or visits to the facility. So in MSF, we're trying lots of different ways throughout the entire, SRH spectrum of care to see what we can learn from the different ways that we can support more self-care models in SRH. Thanks.
That's great. It's great to hear all of those specific examples. I wonder, Manisha, if you can speak to maybe one or two key challenges or lessons learned from these experiences that implementers on the call might find useful when they're trying to launch something similar.
Sure. So for self-managed abortion in particular, I think that at first, there were a lot of hesitations and concerns about how much could we simplify the process and how much, basically could we really trust in people and women to manage their own abortions, whether it was, can we trust them to, accurately assess their last menstrual period, can we trust them to go home with a few more doses or pills of misoprostol if needed? And what we've learned from that is, yes, we can. And actually, it's that trust and respect is a key ingredient to any type of self-care model that we're trying to create. And I think that when I think about what makes it unique, that we're trying to do these models in humanitarian settings, actually isn't the setting itself. It's our traditional approach of the humanitarian aid complex to these populations, right? So our traditional model is we are there to provide care in this very top-down approach. Like, you come to us, to our facilities, we give you the care, then you go home, right? So actually what needs to change is our approach and our perspective and our willingness to let go of that old model and to be more open-minded and really support people. I think that's been the biggest learning. And that's easier said than done, I think, to get out of our old habits of our own humanitarian aid complex.
Thanks. That's such an important point. At the end of the day, right, self-care is about shifting power. And I think you also really underscored how important that is in a humanitarian setting in particular. Again, we particularly in acute settings, as you mentioned, we come in, right, where in some ways there's this savior mentality, right, which can inhibit that power shifting that really needs to happen in order to ensure that people can be empowered to access these services in the way that works best for them. Thanks, Manisha.
Yeah, just to follow up, it's not so much us empowering them as us getting out of their way a lot of the times, right? So we use a lot of phrases like voice for the voiceless, but they are not voiceless, the population. It's more about sharing the microphone and or listening to the voices that are already there.
Excellent point. Excellent point. Great. So now I'm going to turn it over to Sheena. Sheena, similar question. Could you tell us a little bit about some specific ways in which you've applied self-care approaches to increase access to SRH services in humanitarian settings? Sheena, I think you're muted. I can't hear you. Or I'm having an audio issue.
It's not audible. It's not audible at all.
Yeah, sorry, we seem to be having an audio issue. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Oh, there you are.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, wonderful.
Okay, I've unplugged my earphones. I hope there's no background noise. So thank you again, Erin, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. And I hope you're all doing well. I'm sitting here in Scotland, and it's a pleasure to be joining this panel this afternoon. And I wanted to just comment that our thoughts are with our friends and colleagues in Afghanistan and Dr. Shafiq Mirzada, who was planning to be on this panel. I'd like to briefly speak about the advanced distribution of misoprostol for self-administration in the prevention of postpartum hemorrhage as a self-care approach. It's been a bit of a rocky road with this high impact intervention over the past 10 years or so. As many of you know, postpartum hemorrhage, or PPH, is the main cause of maternal deaths globally and in most countries. And many cases of postpartum hemorrhage are preventable with the administration of a uterotonic to contract the uterus. One drug is misoprostol, given immediately after birth. This is recommended by WHO, but with many women giving birth at home in settings where access for whatever reason is a problem, reaching them required innovative approaches. So as part of global efforts to improve prevention and management of PPH, JPIGO successfully introduced the advanced distribution of misoprostol for self-administration, it's a bit of a mouthful, in Afghanistan and South Sudan. At the time, both were challenged with high maternal and newborn mortality, which is also the situation in humanitarian and fragile settings. They have since, of course, become very conflict affected. We reviewed the evidence, and not surprisingly, the highest coverage of administration of misoprostol is achieved if the pregnant woman herself has the 3 tablets of misoprostol, and she can take them after the birth, regardless of who was there and where she gives birth. Misoprostol is a tablet taken with water after the baby is born. It does not require a cold chain, which some of the other drugs to prevent postpartum hemorrhage do. 3 tablets of misoprostol are distributed to pregnant women at around 8 months, along with focused counseling on when and how to take them. In both countries, the feasibility studies were considered safe, acceptable, and feasible with high levels of uptake. We also worked on comprehensively strengthening the health system to respond to PPH. I recall very clearly in South Sudan, sitting in a village under the mango tree, where women shared that they had experienced less bleeding than before, as well as reduced pains after birth. We also tried to introduce this intervention in Yemen before the current crisis, but we were unsuccessful despite extensive advocacy and a simple modeling exercise on how many lives can be saved. So I'll now go on to share 3 main challenges, because I did mention it's been a rocky road. The biggest is around the sensitivity of misoprostol, which, as you know, is an abortifacient, and there's concerns of inappropriate use or misuse by the women. Another challenge was a perception that this may promote home birth, as many countries work to increase facility births. But in fact, due to improved counselling on birth preparedness, we actually found a modest increase in facility births. We also had no cases of mistiming in the studies. No one took the tablets before the baby was born. And a third challenge was that WHO have only recently endorsed advanced distribution of misoprostol for PPH prevention. And over the years we've worked with this, it was on the proviso that someone else would give the women the misoprostol. So in Afghanistan and South Sudan, misoprostol is now included in the essential medicine list, and following intensive advocacy in Afghanistan, it's included in the basic package of health services, but this is yet to be institutionalized. So I'll stop there, Erin, and happy to take questions later. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Sheena. You've highlighted some really important points. I think I heard a similar point to Manisha's, in that one of the challenges that we face is this ability to trust women, to get out of our own way, as Manisha said, and allow women to access care where they need it. And also really want to underscore that point that providing this option of self-care through advanced distribution of misoprostol did not reduce facility births. Again, there's an additive benefit, increasing access. Which is wonderful. The other point I really wanted to underscore that I heard was the role of preparedness. So you talked about how you introduced this in South Sudan and Afghanistan before it became conflict affected. And so I'm wondering if you could briefly say, what did you see, you know, having introduced this before the conflict really started, did you see continued use in these countries once it became more of a conflict affected place, and what effect did this have?
Yeah, so and I'll speak a bit about this in the next under the next heading as well. But yes, it is going on. It's not going on to scale as we very much hope in Afghanistan, because it's reliant on a good supply of misoprostol, and that continues to be a barrier. However, where it is in place, it is going on, and the uptake is still quite high. And of course, because of what is happening now, we're probably going to see a shift back to more home births. And I think that is now something that's great. It's there, and they can expand into other districts as needed. In South Sudan, I think, and I'll also mention this, the community health system in South Sudan is not so functional. And I think it's not been so successful there in terms of sustaining advanced distribution through community health workers. I think that's been a bit of a challenge, but it is available in facilities for use in prevention of PPH. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, you raise a really important point about supplies and logistics. You know, we talked about at the beginning of the session how operational constraints can pose as big of a barrier to technical ones, and that can be a big challenge. Thanks so much, Sheena. So now I'm actually going to turn back to Diana. And Diana, I was hoping since Pro Familia works both with Colombian women, as well as Venezuelan women and girls who've been displaced into Colombia, I'm wondering if you can say a bit about what are some of the specific ways in which the implementation of self-care might differ for these two populations. How is it different for Venezuelan women and girls and others arriving in Colombia as compared to those who live there already?
So more than differentiating between migrants and the host community, I guess in a way what we have to see is more about the context and the scenario, right? Is the context a humanitarian one? And in that sense, both migrants, refugees, and host communities are in the same situation and have an equality of their needs. Even though they might have different barriers, there are similar limitations when regarding to their context. What I think it's interesting when thinking about these differences is just as when we started the event, the minimal initial service package for sexual and reproductive health has shown us these highlighted challenges, some of the ones that you have mentioned around security, limited capacity of the health system for response, the difficulties when it comes to resources or to medical inputs that we can use in order to provide services. And then, of course, the highlighted vulnerability of those who are in this situation. What I think is interesting when we think about the response in humanitarian scenarios and self-care is that we already have an objective and we have the main services that we know we need to prioritize as come with this minimal initial service package. But we also need to recognize that there is a limited capacity for agency that comes with the high vulnerability and difficulties of the situation in which people are in, compared to what you might find in development settings or in just a regular non-humanitarian setting. So just as Manisha was saying a minute ago, I think it is important to recognize the idea that self-care brings the switch from top down to actually people-led and driven health processes, and that we cannot think of self-care in the humanitarian scenario without thinking of ways of collective care, in which both the community that surrounds the people that we're trying to protect and to access services, but also all the actors, the institutional actors that we usually have as health providers, humanitarian organizations, governmental organizations, happen to have the capacity of being enablers of self-care. Self-care won't happen just because I provide some information to them, right? Self-care will happen as we are coordinately acting together in order to enable an ecosystem that will allow self-care to be possible. So I think that will be like the main difference, in a way, taking into advantage the learnings that humanitarian scenarios have showed us, but into the analysis of what self-care needs to promote.
Excellent point. And I see a lot of enthusiasm in the chat for the concept of collective care, which I think is a wonderful phrase. And I think, you raise a really important point just about self-care doesn't happen in a vacuum, right? We talk about the need to shift power to get out of our own way in terms of humanitarian implementers, but this begs the question, what is our role? What is the role of the government? What is the role of other humanitarian actors? The UN system. How do we actually shift that power meaningfully in a way that supports self-care for everyone through this collective care model that you raised, which I love. Sheena, I'm going to turn back to you now. I wonder if you can talk a little bit about, I think perhaps react to what Diana was sharing in terms of the differences or lack thereof, as well as the role of different actors in the humanitarian space, and then any differences you do see in terms of implementation in more stable versus humanitarian settings.
Yeah, so thank you, Erin, and thank you, Diana. I think just coming back to this issue of drug supply, the supply of misoprostol is, in many countries, is a challenge because of the issues around its sensitivity. And so there are certain government restrictions on procurement of this drug. And we were very lucky to partner with organizations such as UNFPA Venture Strategies and MSI, who were able to procure this drug on our behalf when we were piloting it. But I think I think there's a lot of work to be done in this area. And now the countries that I've mentioned, it's both on the essential medicine list. However, that doesn't mean there's a sufficient supply, as we know. Misoprostol is actually available in the reproductive health kit number 8, which is available, but typically this is for use in prevention and management of postpartum hemorrhage in health facilities and not for advanced distribution. The other big difference is that the counselling that is required for self-administration of misoprostol, which looks at the use, the correct timing, the side effects and so on, requires accurate pregnancy dating and culturally appropriate counselling and education materials. And another issue that has come out in both countries is there's been a request to track its utilization by the ministry and or the donors. Again, due to the sensitivities, in some countries we've been asked to track every tablet of misoprostol. And there needs to be a shift to normalizing this medicine. So it's, we don't track antibiotics, which are very misused. We don't track TB drugs. I mean, there's a lot of drugs that, we're not being asked to track. And in a humanitarian context, being asked to track a drug such as this is an additional pressure on a fragile health system. So both the counselling and the tracking of the drug require, as I've mentioned, a strong community healthcare system, which Afghanistan does have for the most part, but South Sudan, as I say, is a bit fragmented. But we know that having community health workers close to the women at the front line is essential for such approaches to improve access and conflict and insecurity. So there has to be a mechanism of how you ensure that they get a supply of the drug to the community health workers, as they're also faced with similar issues. And I just want to end on a comment that both the humanitarian contexts I'm talking about, they're very culturally conservative, marked gender inequalities, we all know this, and there's many barriers to women exercising their reproductive rights. And I think given recent events in Afghanistan, there may be more and tougher barriers for all reproductive health services. And I think this is a big issue as we try and take some of these innovative self-care approaches ahead, that we're faced with cultures where it's the approval for that is not there. Thank you, Erin.
Absolutely, really important points there. And I think, in terms of, laying the groundwork for these kinds of self-care models, again, emphasizing the importance of preparedness. It's very challenging at the onset of an emergency to launch these things from scratch. So what can we be doing to lay that groundwork, whether it's in terms of logistics or in terms of kind of community government stakeholder support around these? Another important point, that I heard you share was just around, the reproductive health kits, the interagency field manual, and the MISP, which hasn't perhaps caught up fully, I think, to the self-care models that are out there and the options that are there for humanitarian implementers. I did want to underscore that, in the new interagency field manual, we do recommend advanced distribution of misoprostol as well as fluorohexidine for clean cord care as part of clean delivery kits. But, I personally don't know of too many examples of it actually going out in that way as part of clean delivery kits. So if any implementers on the call have experience with this, would love to hear you. I'll drop that in the chat, but really important points. So now I'm going to turn back to Faridah. Faridah, you have very unique experience on this panel in terms of direct experience of what it's like to live as a refugee girl and woman and try to access essential sexual and reproductive health care. From your perspective, from your experience, what do you think are the essential ingredients for self-care for sexual and reproductive health in humanitarian settings? Or perhaps in other words, what considerations should implementers, should those on the call be sure to take into account when they want to ensure access for adolescent girls in particular?
Self-care, I think it's a package of information and service to bridge the gaps in the healthy system and policies. Awareness, sexual and reproductive health services, counseling, and safe spaces to help girls and women acquire knowledge and skills on how to decide about their bodies and their lives and their futures. We need a safe spaces, friendly spaces where we can feel we're at home, where we can feel free to share our experiences, where young people can have access to family planning without fear. This can reduce teenage pregnancy and can help them to go back to school. And we need these spaces where young girls who are pregnant and survivors of SGBV and rape to get counseling. I need planning to be clear on coordination in the community, mostly on the local levels. Many programs are good, but they die on the way without reaching the people who need it most. It is good to train advocates in the community who can be role models, like those who went through child marriage and child pregnancy. Women and girls in the community can acquire knowledge and skills on sexual reproductive health to remove the barriers that exist at the healthy centers. Young people have the ability and agency to determine what best works for them, and therefore they should be involved in all processes of program designing and implementation as active decision makers for sustainable change to occur. Bring in professionals to train community activists and those who have been affected. They just need supervision and support on sharing the knowledge. Starting from 12 years old, young people should have sexual education. This doesn't mean telling them to go to have sex. It is about teaching young people about their bodies and the changes they are going through. It is very important to target adolescents and help them understand it is normal. It is normal to go to have your period and normal to go to school. It is normal to be you. So don't force yourself into child marriage because of menstruation. This is self-care. And we have to engage religious leaders and other community leaders. They teach about marriage and they have many followers who are listening to them. If leaders to try to send message against child marriage, that can help. And they can do awareness about protection to send the messages that a young girl should be responsible for her body. The decisions are hers. The community should support them to make the right decisions How? If young people understand their bodies through sexual education, they would know how to protect themselves. They also know that if someone uses them, they know what to do. It is better for her to know other ways to avoid a pregnancy until she's ready to have a baby. We need to reach marginalized population like LGBTQI+. People, they can also feel safe. And we need to reach out also to people living with disabilities to make sure information about self-care is spread to everyone. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Faridah. Really important points. I think in terms of adolescents' rights to access this care, but also the need for us as implementers, supporters to hold ourselves accountable to making that a reality. You mentioned that so often programs actually die on the way. So we think that we're reaching the populations who need it most, when in fact we may not be. And he really underscored how critical it is to involve adolescents to ensure that accountability, to hold ourselves accountable to making sure we have meaningful engagement with adolescents, youth, and other community members. It's really critical. And there's also no other way we can create that safe space, I think, that you're talking about for adolescents to access. Really important points there. So now I'm going to turn it over to Manisha. From your experience as a responder, can you talk about some of the essential ingredients for making self-care a reality and important considerations for other implementers?
Yeah, thanks, Erin. I have been thinking a lot about, what makes self-care successful, what makes these models successful. And I think what's so important to keep in mind is that in these humanitarian contexts, self-care is already happening, right? Self-care has been happening since the beginning of time. Self-care, collective care is happening now, and it's going to happen in the future. So yes, us in the medical community, in the humanitarian aid community, this is something that we're talking about more and more in these last few years, but this has been going on for generations and for decades. And I think that in humanitarian contexts, we often talk about all the barriers, right? There's a broken healthcare system. The governments are corrupt, everything that's terrible that's going on. But I wonder, what if we flip that and instead say, wow, in these contexts, look at the resilience of these populations, right? Look at the creativity. Look at everything that they have already done to survive and thrive in these situations, in these contexts. How do we contribute to that? Right? How do we work in collaboration with that, as opposed to seeing it as this new model that we're bringing in that hasn't existed before, right? And I think that's where the perspective shift is really important, because I was thinking about Sheena. Thank you so much for sharing the story. I was thinking about whose goals are we trying to achieve? So yes, it's wonderful in some ways that this idea of postpartum distribution or postpartum administration of misoprostol at home can make home birth safer. That's great, right? If the goal is to make birth safer, then its impact on facility deliveries shouldn't matter, right? If our goal is to make birth safer where people choose to deliver, we want to make that as safe as possible. If that's our goal, is to help them achieve their goals, or is our goal to increase facility births? And sometimes I find that if we're only thinking about our own goals coming in from the outside, it ends up being more of a barrier, as opposed to thinking what's already going on, how can we tap into the resilience, the needs, with the creativity of the population, and go from there as a starting point.
Really great point. Excuse me. And I hear you underscoring some of Faridah's points as well. It's not that we are coming in as humanitarian implementers bringing this self-care intervention, right? It's been happening for so long. And Faridah made the point about how closely we must be engaging with affected communities, adolescents, others, in order to make this happen. And that really, it's not us bringing it, but it's actually us listening and supporting where we can, which is such an important point. So now I'm going to turn back to Diana. From your perspective, what are some of the essential ingredients, really critical considerations we don't want to miss with self-care in humanitarian setting?
Thank you, Erin. I must say I've really enjoyed the participation of my co-panelists, and I totally agree with what they have said, especially on recognizing what communities have been already doing and the way they have been resilient. and how we can strengthen or help those community networks and ties to be working even in a broader and stronger way in order to promote self-care, both before events happen and afterwards we are in a humanitarian scenario. I also think that when we talk about self-care, we're also talking about the high need, as we have always highlighted in these scenarios, about the promotion of information and education. But when we design this information, it is more than important the participation and the way we take into account intersectionality and the design of campaigns or the design of social interventions that are actually people-centered and take into account the real needs and voices that they have. So in this, I actually would like to highlight, I think, a really interesting example that is from one of our organizings. I think Contigo, which is something that Vital has been working on having a stage of creating, recollecting information from the people you want to reach out and trying to understand the better way to provide them with information around self-care must be key and something that we repeat over and over. And I'll say finally, the idea of still building rigorous evidence that could lead us to better programming different self-care actions before events happen and afterwards. Thank you.
Absolutely, really great points. And your last point about evidence, I definitely want to underscore. Hannah Tapi's Tuan, others on the call, I know recently published a paper really highlighting the opportunity for self-care and need for more information sharing and specifically evidence to support this work so we can really expand it and bring it to scale. So now we're on to our last question for the panel. And so I'm going to ask all of the panelists, what's the most important thing you would like this audience to take away from this event? And Manisha, I'm going to start with you.
Hi, everybody. Sorry for that little delay. I just, before I answer your question, Erin, I want to take the opportunity to answer a question that came in the chat. That was, are we now moving from supporting institutional-based deliveries to home-based deliveries? And I was not trying to advocate necessarily for a shift in our policy, just raising the question that sometimes if we're really trying to work with self-care and really do more what I guess we call community engagement, I think we're going to need to be reflective on whose goals are we trying to achieve. And I think one of the biggest barriers in the example that Sheena has given, for example, of distributing misoprostol for home births, is that it's going to decrease our facility birth rate. I think Sheena highlighted that that wasn't the case in her example, right? So that should no longer be, that isn't the concern. But I also just felt a little bit saddened that we almost need to apologize for that when already making home birth safer, if that's where women choose and want to deliver, is an accomplishment in its own right. And so I just think that it's just one example of the different ways in which, and potentially the longer and longer we work on this, we are going to be confronted with this tension. Whose goals are we trying to achieve? And I think that can be a healthy tension. And that kind of leads me into what I would hope my final point would be, which is, I think that the more and more we engage with this, if we are really looking at it as a way to shift power away from this top-down approach and to really build into and tap into the inherent resilience and self-care and collective care that's happening in communities, that there's going to need to be some self-reflection on our part. And it's going to be uncomfortable. And we might be confronted with some things that we've trained or we've learned inherently as medical professionals or people from the global north, oftentimes, as we are in these leadership positions. And that I think to lean into that discomfort is really important. Working from home with babies can be challenging, but this is my co-presenter.
It's very welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Manisha. Diana, over to you.
I guess as a final message, I'll just like to retake the idea that in Pro Familia, we think that self-care should not be seen as an individual stance or an obligation of people that relieves institutional actors from their obligations. Neither it is a replacement of our role as caretakers and social actors. Rather, the idea of working and retaking self-care, as maybe Manisha was saying, not creating something new, but retaking some of the practices of self-care and promoting them, opens a world of vast collaboration between a mix of social and institutional actors that will be enablers and facilitators of the self-care environment. So as I mentioned before, this idea that self-care is necessarily a matter of collective care, where partners, family, friends, support networks, community health workers, peer providers, health workers, pharmacists, and other civil society actors work in network in order to make it possible.
Excellent, great point. Sheena, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Erin, and thank you to my co-panelists. I would agree with everything that's been said. If I could maybe just pick up on what Manisha said about this issue of home versus facility birth. We know that we have a big problem with deaths due to postpartum hemorrhage. And I think as we see worsening humanitarian situations and the ability of women to access facility care, which is often of mixed quality, even bad quality, we really need to advocate for life-saving interventions by taking services closer to women, and this reduces inequities for the most vulnerable. And I think we're probably going to be looking at that more closely now over the coming years as we see this big shift. And just to echo again this key message, we have to trust and respect women. You know, that self-care is really empowering. And when women know, they all know someone who's died from PPH. And once they understand that these 3 tablets are a life-saving drug, they are unlikely to misuse it. That's been our experience. They want to take it for themselves. So thank you, everyone.
Thanks so much, Sheena. Very important points. Faridah, so wonderful to have you on the panel. You know, from your experience, what is the one thing that you hope the audience on the call takes away in terms of self-care in humanitarian settings?
Yeah, I think it's very important to leverage the power and energy of young people as change agency in our communities, and to involve also girls and women who experienced different types of violence like SGBV, rape, child marriage, and teenage pregnancy, because they can learn how to heal through the process of supporting others and to gain the dignity that self-care brings. They can challenge social norms and enhance demand for access and uptake of sexual reproductive rights services among adolescents and fellow youth, because self-care and sexual reproductive health is a need to everyone, either refuge or host community. Thank you so much.
Erin, you're on mute, dear.
Sorry. So I was just saying, thank you so much, Faridah. I think that was a wonderful note on which to conclude the panel. Really important points. And I want to extend a heartfelt thank you to our panelists for sharing their knowledge, experience, perspectives on self-care, and especially for having these really frank conversations that I think force those of us as humanitarian implementers to look in the mirror and see how we do and don't support self-care for women and girls in these settings. So thank you so much. I see there are a couple hands up. I do encourage everyone to drop their questions in the chat, and for panelists, organizers, and others to jump in and join the conversation. We are going to move on to the second half of our event, which is going to involve breakout discussions, where we're hoping everyone will participate actively. So I'm wondering if we can put up the slides that have our breakout group facilitators on them so we can introduce you all. Okay. So next slide, please. Oh, so posters, actually. So I wanted to mention that perhaps before we go on to the breakout group. So as you know, I mentioned earlier that we had a number of posters submitted that describe in more detail some amazing specific examples of how self-care has been implemented in humanitarian settings. These are just screenshots. In order to access these posters and also to ask questions, leave your comments. The link to the posters is in the chat. It will be available after the event as well. So definitely encourage you all to check those out because they're very interesting. Okay, next slide. So as I mentioned, we're going to have 2 breakout discussions. So there's 2 rounds of 30-minute breakout discussions. The topics are going to be the same for each 30 minutes. So you'll get to choose 2 of those that are listed here on this slide. And for the interpreters, I'll read them quickly. We have self-care and the minimum initial services package for sexual and reproductive health in crisis, self-care and the humanitarian development nexus, self-care for youth, research and metrics for self-care, and then adapting self-care in humanitarian settings to the context. So in just a moment, I'll tell you how you can access these breakout rooms. But first, I want to quickly introduce our breakout group facilitators. So next slide, please. So for self-care in the MISP, we have Dr. Stacy from the International Rescue Committee, as well as myself, supporting and facilitating this discussion. For self-care in the Humanitarian Development Nexus, we have Gatarian Dirangu, who's the Deputy Technical Director and FPRH Technical Lead at Pathfinder for the Momentum Project. We have Henna Tapis from Japaigo as well. Next slide. For self-care for youth in humanitarian settings, we're joined by Foku Hilux, who's a youth and SRHR activist from Cameroon, as well as Anushka Kalyanpour from CARE. For research and metrics, this will be facilitated by Angel Foster from the University of Ottawa, as well as Ali Al-Garabli from UNFPA in Jordan. Next slide. And then last but certainly not least, we have adapting self-care in humanitarian settings to the context with Rupan Gill, Genevieve Tam, and Catherine Cleverly from Vitala Global. So I think without further ado, I think we're going to move on to the breakout groups, particularly in the interest of time. So I'm wondering, can our Tech Change folks please help us in terms of giving participants access to those breakout groups? You will see there's a breakout rooms tab at the lower right of your screen.
So all of the breakout rooms are now open. You can select which room you would like to go to. Our facilitators and organizers for each breakout room session are already in each breakout room. As a participant, if you are struggling to move yourself into the room that you would like to choose, please message me and I can manually put you into your own room. As a note, self-care and the MISP will remain here in the plenary room so that we can allow for language translation. The other 4 rooms will be transitioning to the breakout rooms. The first room, self-care, and the MISP will remain here.
Okay, so everyone, please do, if you haven't already, select your breakout group, and I think you'll be moved there automatically.
Erin, I'll just go ahead and share my screen, shall I? Given we're
Perfect.
staying.
Yes, so I will turn it over to you, Stacy.
I think people are moving. Cool. Can you see that, Erin?
I can, yes. It looks like you're in presenter mode, though. Like I see the presenter mode.
There you go. Is that better?
Yes, that works.
Cool. We just wait a few minutes, shall we? Let's see. The numbers are still going down.
So if you're in this room and you wanted, this is the self-care in the MISP group. If you wanted to select another, a different group, click the breakout rooms tab down at the bottom right. And then if you click that unassigned, it will kind of collapse itself and you'll see a list of the different breakout groups. And on the right, you can click join, and that's how you join the breakout group.
I mean, perhaps in the interest of time, we can just get started, and I won't take it personally if people continue to leave.
Sure, go ahead, Stacy.
Great, thanks everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. My name's Stacy and I work for the International Rescue Committee as a senior technical advisor for emergency health. I hope, like me, everyone enjoyed that panel. I thought it was really, really powerful and really insightful. And what we're hoping to do now with these breakout groups is to give the floor to all of you to start sharing your own experiences, thoughts and perspectives. So in this discussion, we're going to discuss and unpack the challenges and opportunities in implementing self-care as part of the MISP, the minimum initial service package that we often use in the acute phase of humanitarian crises. I think self-care, when it comes to the MISP, has a lot of opportunities in helping us achieve the MISP objectives, in expanding and also maintaining access to services. But it's not necessarily easy or straightforward to do. And this is what we really want to explore together in this discussion. So we're going to start with a very quick refresh of the MISP so that we're all on the same page. And then we're going to use a case study to help just situate our discussion as well. So without further ado, we'll get started. Cool, hopefully you can all see the screen. Someone please come off mute and let me know if that isn't the case. So quick refresh on the MISP. So the MISP really defines which sexual and reproductive health services are most important in preventing morbidity and mortality, whilst also protecting the right to life with dignity, particularly among women and girls in humanitarian settings. It's really our kind of go-to map that we use in an acute phase crisis when it comes to SRH. There are 6 core objectives to the MISP that you can see on the screen. We'll go through these quickly. So the first objective really centers on coordination. So ensuring that there's a lead organization coordinating SRH activities, that there's an SRH coordinator, that we have good coordination amongst all the partners involved in delivering and supporting SRH services. The second objective centers around the prevention of sexual violence and response to the needs of survivors in emergencies. So this very much involves working with other sectors and clusters, particularly protection, to put preventative measures in place to protect women and girls from sexual violence. It also ensures making sure that we have clinical management of rape, clinical care available for sexual assault survivors, that we have strong referral pathways in place to support access to support services. The third MISP objective centers around the prevention of the transmission and also morbidity and mortality of HIV and sexually transmitted infections. So this involves a lot of different activities, including establishing safe blood transfusion services, ensuring the availability of condoms and that they're accessible, the availability of antiretroviral therapy, including PEP, and also ensuring the availability of syndromic treatment for STIs. The fourth objective really focuses on preventing excess maternal mortality and newborn morbidity and mortality. And there are a lot of things encompassed in this objective. So ensuring the availability and accessibility of clean and safe delivery, essential newborn care, ensuring that life-saving emergency obstetric and newborn care services are in place. So both BMONC services and CMONC services, use of clean delivery kits where applicable, ensuring that we have 24/7 services and referral systems, and also the availability of post-abortion care. The fifth MISP objective centers around preventing unintended pregnancies. So this involves ensuring the availability of a range of long-acting, reversible and short-acting contraceptive methods. The 6 MISP priorities centres on planning as soon as we can for comprehensive SRH services, so thinking beyond the acute phase and looking at how we can really integrate SRH services into primary healthcare systems and support health system strengthening. And last but not least, there's an additional priority under the MISP that centres on ensuring the availability of safe abortion care to the full extent of the law. So that's a quick recap of the MISP. What we're going to focus on talking about here is self-care approaches within the MISP, so across these different objectives. Now, to support our conversation, we wanted to use a case study. We're going to use Tigray as a case study, but this is by no means to confine or constrain our discussion. Very happy for us to talk and hear reflections across a number of contexts, but we thought it would be useful to have something to hang our conversation on. So a quick overview of the situation in Tigray. Huge needs. It's a really large and significant crisis, over 5 million people in need. Looking at SRH in particular, there are reports of widespread sexual violence, which we know can lead to increased rates of unintended pregnancy, unsafe abortion, maternal neonatal death, etc. There's approximately 22,000 survivors of sexual violence in need of care, approximately 45,000 women who rely on access to contraceptives, and just under 120,000 women who are currently pregnant and in need of access to maternal health services. Looking at capacity, there are a lot of challenges with capacity to deliver services. There are very low numbers of health facilities that are fully functional, only 37%. There's been a lot of damage and destruction to health infrastructure. A lot of health service delivery currently is being done via mobile teams. And there are also limitations when it comes to service delivery capacity for SRH in particular. Approximately 21% of health facilities have capacity for the clinical management of rape, and only 17% have capacity for maternal health services. There are also a lot of challenges in this crisis. In the interest of time, I won't go into them all, but there are a lot of issues with humanitarian access, particularly in and out of the region, which is affecting the ability to move personnel, the ability to get supplies into the region. There are quite dynamic pockets of insecurity that can affect population movement of humanitarian workers. And there's also very, very poor telecommunications infrastructure. So both in terms of mobile networks, email access, that sort of thing. So that's sort of Tigray in a nutshell, big needs and big challenges. I'm going to stop talking and I'm very keen to open the floor to hear from you all. These are just some guiding questions to guide our discussion. As I said, we can use Tigray as a case study, but very happy to hear your experiences from other crises too. And to kick us off, what we wanted to start the discussion was really thinking about the specific ways in which self-care approaches could be used to support access to the MISP in a context like Tigray, or certainly in any other acute phase response. While we're thinking about specific ways that we could use self-care with the MISP, also, welcome thoughts around what the entry points would look like, what implementation might look like, as well as any of the challenges and barriers that you would anticipate when using self-care approaches in the MISP. So let me stop there and open the floor now. Please feel free to raise your hands or just come off mute and share your thoughts or perspectives. I can't actually see any hands if there are hands up as well. So perhaps just come off mute. No takers. Okay, let's rewind and break this down then. So let's go back to just thinking about the MISP and the different interventions that form part of the MISP. Any thoughts around particular interventions that we think self-care approaches could really work?
Stacy, this is Bill.
Bill,
pass.
Go ahead.
Now, just an obvious one is self-managed abortion, women's abortion self-care with misoprostol, or if available, mifepristone and misoprostol, where they can manage their own abortion process. So whether through a harm reduction or a sort of a direct distribution of medication, if that's possible, but certainly supporting women in that process when they have access to the drugs.
Great, thanks, Bill. I think that's a great suggestion. Any other thoughts? So Bill's tables, utilizing self-care approaches when it comes to safe abortion care. Yes, Desiree, I can see a hand, please.
Hi, this is Desiree from UNFP. Yeah, to add on what Bill said, obviously some of the things that have already been mentioned, I'm thinking about MISO for postpartum, to prevent postpartum hemorrhage, but also different contraceptives included in like those that people normally use, such as oral contraceptives, but also I don't think in the context of Tigray that it's actually used, but self-induced, what's it called? The one where you give yourself subcutaneous DMPA.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you, Desiree, for those suggestions. What about when it comes to clinical care for sexual assault survivors? Any thoughts around how self-care approaches could help us really expand access to clinical management of rape or clinical care for sexual assault survivors?
Hi, this is Sandy at the Women's Refugee Commission. I would just say, I would just say emergency contraception, I believe, is really key in care for survivors and making that available for both unwanted and unintended pregnancy as well. And that, I don't know, I'm not quite sure where things are at, but it also seems given both things need to be taken in a timely way to prevent unintended pregnancy or HIV, I think both of those would lend themselves well to self-care.
Great, thank you, Sandy. Excellent points. Any others for anyone? I mean, does anyone in the group actually have experience of doing this, of doing self-care approaches with the MISP, not necessarily in Tigray, but in any acute phase crisis? I'll take that as a no, or shyness to share your experiences.
Hello, this is Radhika from Nepal.
Go ahead.
I don't know how it's close to MISP because I did not attend all classes also I'm learning, but during this COVID pandemic in Nepal, we implemented RMNCH guideline. That is, I think that's cover some part of the MISP, at that online package, which we provided to government health workers who are frontliner to work to respond to COVID-19, and that package cover all this like reproductive health SRHR component that how they can how the health workers can continue these services from their regular health hospitals, clinics, and also from quarantine places. So in quarantine places, we also talk about the condom boxes, separate toilet when they go home, like there in the first phase of COVID time, we have a lot of quarantine places, and then we managed, like, after spending time quarantine, when they go back to home, to make sure them that give the information about the family planning, reproductive health, SRHR, and also provide to them condoms and online hotline services. So these things, and for the menstruation also, we did lobby with the Nepal government to integrate this sanitary pad in humanitarian package, which we distributed, our government distributed to the COVID pandemic affected people. So these things I know from like RMNCH regular, our reproductive health cluster, and I'm sure there is something more from UNFPA support in MISP also, which exactly I don't know what they did. Thank you.
Thank you, Radhika, for sharing that experience. Any others? I'm just trying to see if there's hands up. Apologies if you do have a hands up and I haven't seen it. I'm not ignoring you, and please feel free just to come off mute. So it seems quite clear to me that there's a lot of value and potential for self-care to be used, self-care approaches to be used in a variety of different ways when it comes to MISP implementation. Also quite striking, again, I don't know if it's just shyness that no one really jumped to share concrete, examples of using self-care along the MISP, that we aren't necessarily, doing this as much as we could be doing it. And so I'm keen to sort of unpack perspectives around the challenges of rethinking in some ways how we are approaching MISP implementation in acute phase emergencies. So what are some of the challenges or barriers or blocks that we're facing to advance the self-care agenda when it comes to the MISP?
Hey, Stacy, this is Erin.
Go ahead, Erin.
My hunch is that it's not just shyness. I think that we haven't really advanced self-care, particularly in the context of acute emergencies. And I do think the Tigray case study is a really interesting one, given the level of disruption of the health system and other challenges faced. As much as those challenges are really critical for any type of humanitarian operation, it does seem like self-care could play a role. And, from where I sit, in an acute emergency, and I think, COVID kind of counts as well there, right? Especially at the beginning of the pandemic. A lot of what I saw is just a lack of familiarity with the approaches, and also lack of understanding of what the entry points would be, to that second question. Which really then links to the third point around preparedness. Is it really possible to launch a self-care where it hasn't already been in place when an acute emergency hits? Or is there more that needs to be done around preparedness in order to make that happen?
Great, thanks, Erin. That's a great segue into that question. I think I was really struck, a point that was made repeatedly across the panel, particularly by Manisha, about, advancing the self-care agenda is as much about change on our own mentalities and approaches and how we're doing this than anything else. And that really struck me, and struck me when thinking about acute phase implementation when it comes to the MISP, and actually when you're knee deep in the middle of responding to an acute phase crisis, it's almost impossible to be trying to completely change mentalities and age-old approaches. And so I think the role of preparedness here is actually really significant. So, thinking ahead within contexts, how we work to think through with women self-care options, but also as institutions within our own organizations, how we think ahead of time about using self-care within the MISP. And I think also that, we're still learning as a humanitarian sector. We're still, I say still learning. There's still a lot of areas for us to improve in getting the MISP right when it comes to acute phase response. And now, thinking about how we can use self-care within that, I think the agenda and the road ahead of us is huge in what needs to happen. But keen to pick up this preparedness concept, with people on the call. Have any of you, been involved in thinking through, self-care approaches in the MISP as part of preparedness, either, in country with your existing programs ahead of an acute phase response, or as part of, your organizational conversations? I can't see Sandy if that's a new hand or an old hand, but if it's a new one, you're very welcome to come off mute.
Oh, sorry, did I actually have my hand up? I think, I'll lower it, but I will pipe in here a little bit. I think, Women's Refugee Commission has been looking at piloting models of community preparedness, which are intended to kind of eventually influence self-care approaches as the community becomes more aware of, for example, the critical needs for survivors of sexual violence, the time-sensitive needs, emergency contraception in particular, that eventually, certain things do have an evidence base, obviously emergency contraception for community-based care and self-care, but in a package like care for survivors of sexual violence, I think one of the challenges just the lack of an evidence base for the full package of care. So we're sensitive to all of the issues, not just the immediate healthcare needs, but psychosocial, legal, all of that, security. So so we're in the process, I think, of looking at the community-based care approach as a step towards more self-care.
Great, thank you, Sandy. That sounds really exciting. And I agree. I think it's also, I think what also complicates advancing self-care in the MISP is that we have a very mixed evidence base. I would say that the majority of interventions and utilizing self-care approaches, we don't yet have an evidence base for. It's the minority where there is some sort of evidence base. And I think that adds further complication when we think about, how do we do this alongside, the appropriate operational research to start generating that evidence as well. But looking forward to hearing more from you, Sandy, about those community-based approaches in the future. Any thoughts from anyone else on preparedness?
Sorry, can I just take one moment to add one other thing? So in the IWOG Insider this week, we're going to be releasing a revised and updated community-based care curriculum that people might find of interest, and it's specific to the MISP, so it's community preparedness around the MISP. Thanks.
Okay, great, perfect. We all look forward to reading that. Yes, Degusa, go ahead. Not sure if it's an accidental hand or a real hand, but please feel free to come off mute.
Bonjour Stacy.
Bonjour.
En fait, moi, je me dis que pour cet atelier, je suis aussi là pour apprendre sur tout ce qui est MISP parce que je viens de vivre une situation tout récemment en RCA où je pense que la situation est complètement dénudée de tout ce qui est MISP. Et avec ce contexte-là, je me suis demandé, mais comment on fait pour pouvoir mettre en œuvre tout cela et surtout attirer l'attention sur tout ce qui est MISP parce que déjà avoir accès aux populations, c'est un peu difficile. Même avec les humanitaires, c'est difficile de sortir et d'aller faire les activités. Et c'est aussi difficile d'avoir accès aux communautés, tout ça. Je ne sais pas comment on peut mettre en pratique l'auto-soin dans des cas comme ça. et surtout avec le MISP, quoi. C'est ce qui m'a beaucoup plus poussé à assister à cet atelier. Donc voilà.
Stacy, did you get that? I wasn't sure if you had the interpretation button at the ready.
Yeah, great. Excellent points. And I think, I think that links to, thoughts around preparedness and how we can utilize, advancing the self-care agenda in the preparedness phase where we have access, recognizing that in many acute phase emergencies, not just Tigray, access is something that's very dynamic that we can gain and lose on a day-to-day or week-to-week basis. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity when we're not in the acute phase, when we're in this phase, we're actually really advancing the agenda and moving the needle when we already have that access. But really good point. Anyone else? Someone else off mute I can hear wants to contribute? Might be
Stacy, this is Bill again.
Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I think we have to think back about the excellent point Manisha made in the large forum about our perspectives as agencies and healthcare providers, and recognize that there's a lot of change that has to happen in perspective, from systems and implementers and individuals themselves that again the sweeping in to provide care and just the normal way that providers are often approach care of sort of the the provider, just the name of it, right? We provide that care, and so there's as good as many of these sort of technologies are, and safety is well known with EC, and we're gaining that confidence and evidence, with self-managed abortion, not necessarily in humanitarian context, although I see some nice posters about it for this session. So we're gaining ground on that, but it's just the perspectives of providers and agencies that will have to change to really embrace this. So whether that's a whole nother kind of training issue or policy issues or values clarification issues to kind of address those biases and perspectives, I think that's going to be an ongoing challenge and issue we're going to have to continue to think about and address. So I just didn't want to forget that excellent point that Manisha made.
Yeah, thanks, Bill, and completely agree. That was certainly something that struck a huge chord with me, and sounds like an excellent place for us to start when we think about where do we start when it comes to this. And I think our own attitudes, our own perceptions, and challenging ourselves, because I think when we think about barriers, there's a lot of barriers that we're putting in place with our own preconceived notions and biases as well. So on that note, there's 1 minute to go, so I thought I would leave it there with Bill's powerful takeaway at the end. You're now I don't know, Erin, are they able to move groups now? Just had a message flash up, this group's coming to an end.
Not quite yet. We'll all join back together in the plenary automatically, and then people will have an option to self-select into another group.
Okay, perfect.
So stay tuned, 20 seconds. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everyone. Enjoy your next breakout.
We're back. Okay, hi everyone. Looks like we're back together. I hope you enjoyed your first breakout session. We're going to go right into the last one. You can feel free to self-select using the feature on the bottom right, the breakout room feature. If you do need interpretation, stay in this room where we'll have self-care for the Humanitarian Development Nexus in this room with interpretation. So please join your next breakout group. Thank you.
As a reminder, for our second session of breakout rooms, the session titled Self-Care and the Humanitarian Development Nexus will take place in this room, the plenary room, so you do not need to leave if you're interested in attending that session. However, the other 4 breakout rooms are now open: Self-Care in the MISP, Self-Care for Youth and Humanitarian Settings, Research and Metrics for Self-Care and Humanitarian Settings, and Adapting Self-Care in Humanitarian Settings are now open. If you need help moving to your next breakout room, please message me in the chat and I can move you manually.
Can you please move me to the research metrics, please, manually? I can't do it myself.
Sure. If anyone else needs assistance moving to a breakout room, please message me or message in the chat which room you'd like to move to, and I can move you manually.
Good afternoon from Nigeria. Sorry, I don't know how to navigate my way to the breakout room, please. I'm sorry.
Which breakout room would you like to go to?
Hi, everyone. Please, can you take me to the breakout room? I need assistance.
If you need assistance moving to your breakout room, please type in the chat which room you would like to go to so that I can move you.
Health assistant to join a breakout room, please.
Parce qu'ils avaient mis, moi j'ai cliqué pour voir d'abord, alors qu'il fallait cliquer pour aller en...
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the breakout room on self-care in the humanitarian development nexus. We have 30 minutes to discuss, reflect on what we've learned and also see how development actors and humanitarian actors can be able to work together to realize self-care in these settings. My name is Gadari Ndirango. Work with Pathfinder as a FPRH lead for Momentum Integrated Health Resilience. My co-facilitator is Hannah Tapis, working with JPIGO. And we'll want to make it as interactive as possible. So please feel free, to share your thoughts from what you've learned from the plenary session, from the other breakout room, that you are in, and see how we can be able to take forward, working more collaboratively from both humanitarian development actors. I'll hand over to my colleague, Hannah, to facilitate this session. Over to you, Hannah. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathari, and welcome everyone. Hopefully you are all in this discussion session out of interest in discussing the role of humanitarian and development actors in advancing the self-care agenda. If you, as I think has been clearly noted, if you would like to move to another breakout session, you can move yourself there through the button at the bottom or type in the chat, but we will assume that everyone who is here now is here intentionally and get started. Although we have quite a large group, as Kathari said, we would love for this to be an open discussion. And so if your bandwidth allows, please do turn on your video. Feel free to type introductions again in the chat. As Kathari mentioned, my name is Hannah. I'm a technical advisor at JPIGO and co-chair the IWOG Maternal and Newborn Health Sub-Working Group. In our session today, we're keen to just have open discussion to learn from your experiences and perspectives and discussions over the last, or thinking about what are the specific ways that humanitarian and development actors can work together to realize self-care in humanitarian settings. I just typed in the chat, but would welcome perspectives if there's anyone who would like to react to some of the challenges or models shared in the opening plenary or in discussions so far. We've heard a lot about challenges in terms of support systems needed to advance self-care, whether that is advocacy, supply chain, creating enabling environments. And we know many actors can play different roles in that space. So would love to hear from you, what has worked in your work? What roles have humanitarian or development actors played? And whether it's for self-care or other services, so that we can learn from that. Are there any, feel free to unmute yourself and jump in. Is there anyone who would like to start us off by sharing?
Hi, this is Radhika from Nepal. I want to share something in the context of Nepal. Since from the beginning of COVID pandemic, there are many approaches is going on. For example, development actors are doing advocacy from different platform to integrate self-care packages related to SRHR, family planning, from different multi-sectoral ways. For example, something from the women's children ministry WASH, that's near close to the menstruation topic. So the youth groups, so some people are, some development worker are doing advocacy to integrate self-care package related to SRHR in humanitarian package, which they are distributing during the COVID pandemic. For example, menstruation pad, sanitary pad to the girls and women who are in quarantine, who are in hospital. And the another way is that the government, our government family welfare division has a collaborative approach. They just develop a mapping approach and they divided the areas to the development partner who are interested, who have will come forward to support in MISP packages, during this pandemic. So they divided based on their presence in different geographical area, they divided the development partners to work on that. And UNFPA is supporting to host that reproductive health cluster meeting frequently. For example, RMNCHEA, that is like nationwide coverage to trained frontline health workers, especially government and also from the private sector, to how to deal provide continuity of the services, this maternity, SRHR, adolescent focus, women's focus services during the pandemic situation, from hospital, from quarantine, and then we development partners divided in different, based on our presence, we divided in different areas, and we trained. First, we get trained from the government side, master trainer developed from the government side with the support of WHO and UNFPA. And then we deliver the trainings. This is the one model that is going on in Nepal. Thank you.
Thank you, Manisha. You shared so many great examples, I think, not just of humanitarian development actors, but public and private sector, multi-sectoral, all engaged in SRHR and humanitarian response. George, are you trying to jump in? Would you like to add something? So George has unmuted. I'm not sure if that was intentional, George. Okay. Maybe is there anyone else who would like to react to that or ask questions or share their own experience? I think we may be getting some background noise from someone. If you would like to jump in, please do unmute, but if not, perhaps if you can keep your microphone off, that will help. Always Zoom challenges.
George, could you please mute? George.
Wonderful. Okay, apologies, everyone. Manisha, you shared some great examples. Gathari, I wonder if you, from the Momentum Integrated Health Resilience Program, I know you shared in our last session quite a bit that your consortium is doing, working, bridging as sort of development actors in very fragile settings. I wonder if you have any thoughts you'd like to share?
Thank you, Hannah. And yeah, great. So Momentum Integrated Health Resilience is, even though it's leaning more towards the development space, it's actually anchored at the nexus, so that then it provides that bridge between the humanitarian side and the development side. And one of the things, of course, especially that came out in the other breakout discussion, is the need for us to be able to collaborate and coordinate more with players across both sides. And this, again, I think mentions that including governments, of course, making sure that where possible, they are playing the rightful role, but other partners and other actors, it could be non-state or other state actors, but mentioning that all the way from ENNG's agencies to all the way to whoever it is, international NGOs, local organizations, and whoever else, sort of having a way of making sure that we are working more collaboratively between us or among us, so that we can be able to support the people that we are working with. And also, I think one thing that came out, and it also came out in the panel discussion, is making sure that we do recognize and respect the context and the people that we are serving, recognizing that they have been taking care of themselves for a while. Self-care has been practiced for generations. And so seeing what opportunities we are able to seize to be able to promote, take forward, and help the people that you are working with to sort of solve, their own, look for solutions for their own problems. Because as we do recognize, for us to make them more resilient, we really need to look for homegrown, local solutions, and not as coming us from wherever we are, coming with our own solutions that may not be, they may not really be relevant to the context. And I think for this breakout room is just for us to think through what are some of the things that we've seen either have worked and we can learn from and magnify those. What are some of the things have had difficulties working, and so what have we learned from that, so that then we can be able to take to overcome whatever challenges we may have encountered. And like Hannah, you mentioned, it doesn't necessarily have to be confined to self-care. We can think a little more broadly. What do we see as opportunities for the humanitarian and development actors to work more collaboratively than maybe they have done? Or if we do have, and I like the fact that oh, I forget her name from Nepal. What the development actors have been able to do, especially in terms of integrating all services in the wake of the COVID pandemic, and being able to divide region by geographic region, so that then we do not overlap or step on each other's toes. But I think for purposes of this breakout, it would really be very helpful, hearing from people on the ground, people who have particular, experience. And like you said, it doesn't necessarily have to be in self-care, because we know there are some lessons we can learn from other care, then we can be able to contextualize that for self-care. So I would invite, members of this breakout room to sort of feel free to share your experiences, your thoughts, and what you see as opportunities that you can be able to, take forward, as we appreciate the fact that, humanitarian and fragile setting are unlikely to go away anywhere soon, until, because we know there are many causes of fragility, including natural disasters, conflict, and whatever is happening now in Afghanistan. So making sure that then we're able to take the lessons that we learned over the many years that we've been doing this, and see how we can be able to prepare populations or communities to become more resilient and use their own, looking for their own solution, for us being there to support them to get there. I think I do recognize that there are a good number of people here who have actual practical examples that would be very beneficial for our discussion. So over to you, my colleagues. And I don't want to call out on anyone, because I do recognize some people who I know have particular experience that they can be able to share with us. And feel free to speak in whatever language is best for you. Okay, Pilar, go ahead. Thank you.
Hola, buenos días. Voy a hablar en español. I speak in Spanish. Quisiera comentar un poco la experiencia de un socio local. Yo estoy basada en Perú y creemos que uno de los contextos de ayuda humanitaria también son las situaciones de migración, ¿no? En el caso de Perú y otros países en América Latina, América del Sur, estamos recibiendo mucha migración de personas, por ejemplo, de Venezuela, por el contexto que se vive en Venezuela. Y tenemos un socio local que ha desarrollado un programa de ayuda humanitaria que contiene diversos, a su vez, programas, ¿no? Uno es, por ejemplo, servicios de salud sexual y reproductiva para mujeres y jóvenes venezolanos, pero también se han dado cuenta que necesita algo complementario, como por ejemplo es ayudarle a tramitar los papeles y los registros necesarios para quedarse en Perú. Porque también hay necesidad de que las personas encuentren un trabajo, también el proceso de ayudarles con ollas comunes para la alimentación. Es decir, muchas veces las personas que migrantes, no solo es que la prioridad no es para ellos la salud sexual y reproductiva, sino es otros servicios que son más importantes, como la alimentación o la seguridad o los papeles y las regulaciones que se exigen en los países, ¿no? Entonces, este socio local lo que ha hecho es, a la par de ofrecer servicios de salud sexual y reproductiva, como métodos anticonceptivos o cuidados durante la menstruación, también está colaborando con otras organizaciones para poder proveer esos otros servicios para las personas migrantes, ¿no? También se está apoyando mucho el tema de una línea telefónica para consejería o para escucha activa, para poder hablar con las personas, porque la situación de migración y el contexto que viven realmente es difícil, ¿no? Quería compartir nada más eso. Gracias.
Thank you. Such important points and really tangible examples, I think, both of the partnership as well as the hotline or phone line you mentioned, thinking about what are the best ways to provide support to enable people to meet their needs. Really, really great example. I think we can all learn from or think about how to adapt in our settings. Would anyone else like to share or ask questions of those who presented examples? Otherwise, I'll let Kathari call out on folks he knows. Please go ahead if you'd like to share.
Yeah, I like that, Pilar's also pointing out, migrant populations and working with local organizations. I think that's also a very important point that she's brought up. Just like Radhika mentioned, the other bit of, sharing geographies. I'm just wondering, we have just a few more minutes, anybody who, and like we said, it doesn't necessarily have to confine, we don't have to overthink it, but just sharing some of the things we've seen as we work in these areas or live in these settings, and seeing then how we can be able to allow others to learn from us in terms of making sure that we make a very coherent and workable partnership between development and humanitarian actors, so that we do not really leave anyone behind, but also, even as we are responding to a crisis, we are thinking about, propelling the population that is involved into a more stable setting, into the development space right from the beginning, without necessarily having to put things in a phase manner. Some of those things could actually be happening concurrently. So working together really we are convinced actually would be very, very helpful. And yeah, if anybody has any examples, please go ahead and share with us in a few minutes that are remaining.
Muy buen día, soy José Ross de Guatemala. No speaks English, lo voy a hacer en español.
Please go with español.
También un poco en relación a lo que compartió nuestra colega Pilar. Aquí en Guatemala también nosotros tenemos un socio que también está trabajando para dar asistencia de salud sexual y reproductiva a la población migrante. Guatemala es uno de los países en donde cada día pasan cientos de migrantes, ¿verdad? Y la más reciente tuvimos una marcha grandísima de migrantes que vienen de Honduras, Salvador, Nicaragua, y se suman también población de Guatemala. Entonces, esta contraparte, este socio de aquí de Guatemala, pues lo que ha estado trabajando es precisamente dar asistencia de servicio de salud sexual reproductiva a esta población migrante que va de tránsito a través de un kit. Es un kit que se le entrega enfocado más que todo a la mujer que migra para los Estados Unidos. Este kit contiene, por ejemplo, condones, contiene toallas sanitarias, también contiene ahora están también contemplando misoprostol, porque uno nunca sabe lo que pasa en la vida de las mujeres que migran, porque aquí los mal llamados coyotes muchas veces por pago de la remuneración que hacen para llevar a las mujeres a los Estados Unidos, muchas veces pues las violan, ¿verdad? Sexualmente, y durante el tránsito pues a veces experimentan un embarazo no deseado. Entonces por eso también están contemplando misoprostol para este kit que le están entregando a las mujeres. Yo creo que esa es una forma también de cómo hacer un paquete de salud sexual reproductiva para la población migrante. Solamente quería compartir eso. Gracias.
Thank you, Jose. I think, yeah, raising the question of self-care support and modalities for populations on the move as well is really important to think about, what does support look like in that context, both commodities and information. I think we probably only have a minute or two left. Is there anyone who would like to share some closing reflections, any ideas that these discussions today have sparked for you? Coco, if we can call on you as one of our youth spokespeople, would you like to share any closing thoughts? Oh, we might have just lost him. And I see some great agreement, similar experiences being shared in the chats.
Yeah, I think we are about to end this session. But I must say that, listening from colleagues from South America has also been very, very helpful indeed to hear talking about, migrant populations that we perhaps sometimes do not think about. And also, obviously, we know that there tend to be, internally displaced persons, but also refugees that we should always make sure that we factor in all the phases of our response to any crisis.
Well, I see the numbers coming back. So I believe folks from other groups will be slowly filtering in. So really just want to thank everyone for sharing their thoughts and reflections today. I know it's given us a lot to think about in our own work. So do stay in the room and on the line for, I believe, just a few brief closing remarks as others come back from the other breakouts.
Yeah, thank you, Hannah, and thank you everyone who was in this breakout session. Really appreciate your insights.
Looks like we're getting back to our main plenary session. Give a few moments to allow everyone to get back from their breakout rooms. And we can move to the next slide, actually. So those of you that have that are already here, welcome back. And it was great. I think we've had such a wonderful morning and afternoon, evening discussing so many important topics. So we wanted to take this opportunity now in the last sort of 10 to 15 minutes of our session to conclude is to go back onto Slido. So you can join at slido.com. and put in the code here, 568905. And we just love folks to reflect on today and think about 1 or 2 words that come to mind as your takeaway from today's session. Nana has also shared a link in the chat that can allow you to access the Slido as well. That's great. We're seeing engaging people, collective care, youth-led, collaboration, listening, youth involvement, partnerships, shift mindset, trust the users, connections. I see a lot of community engagement. VCAT, for those that don't know, VCAT, values, clarifications, and attitudes transformation. Building trust between consumer and provider. Data sharing and collaboration. So as you can see with this word map, the words that are shared the most end up being highlighted. So it looks like community engagement has come up quite a bit here. And engage consumers in the self-care process, adapt research, evidence-based research. So those of you who've come back from the breakout sessions, we're just doing a wrap-up Slido, and you can log back on to slido.com and the code is here, or use the QR code. Ground up approach, fluid adaptation of intervention. Sustainability, addressing barriers to adolescent and youth SRH self-care, sustainability, excellent. So it really looks like from the session, just from the plenary and of course from the breakout sessions, that this idea of community engagement, really trusting our users, youth-led, ground-up approach, engaging folks in the self-care process has really kind of resonated throughout the session. So let's go on to the next question. So we have a few more minutes before we have to wrap up. So in your view, what are the most promising opportunities for self-care in humanitarian settings? You can type them in the chat, connect onto the Slido. And I'd also like to share with you that we had note takers for each of the repertoire at each of the breakout rooms. And so we will be collating all of the reflections that came out of those breakout rooms so that we can then put it together, and we will share it out with all the participants from today's session as sort of a call to action. So interactive apps, shifting views about internet as a human right, digital tools, digital health intervention, self-managed abortion, making emergency kits and SRH a top priority, as we do WASH and other emergency situations. Digital platforms. There's a lot of digital here. I would love if someone or folks that are talking, saying digital or digital media, and I mean, why? You can also write that into the Slido. Harm reduction in areas with limited access to abortion care, menstrual hygiene products, implement self-care for FP services, auto-aborto, community as co-creators of knowledge, hotlines. This is good to go across various SRH. Mental health, yes, very, very important to an area, topic area. So just for the interest of time, we'll move to the next question. But if you would like, just drop it in the chat. What are some of the other promising opportunities that you have heard or you've kind of reflected on throughout the session today? And now in one sentence, what action will you take to advance self-care for SRH as part of humanitarian response? It is important that humanitarian actors must train young people on the spot so that they can take charge in the event of the end of their mission. Great. Share knowledge about what is done. So an action thing that we will do really to really advance it. And as we had mentioned at the very beginning, the whole concept or idea about thinking of what is it about self-care, what is it about humanitarian settings that really allows self-care to be an opportunity that is different and unique. Advocate for community-centered research and design processes for interventions. Take a step back and listen to the individual's community. Advocacy for VCATs of values, clarification, attitudes, transformation to help providers support self-care. Disseminate knowledge, ensure access, and work collaboratively. Empower and advocate for youth. Let them embrace their power to self-care. Políticas locales para el autocuidado en salud sexual y reproductiva, advocacy for abortion decriminalization and demedicalization. You can see some chat responses as well that are coming in. Professional mental well-being, that's very important. Yes, self-care for ourselves. Actually, that's really important as people that are within this work and that are doing it in day and out. Advocacy with other partners on the importance of self-management and success rate for sustainability and active participation. Play a role to integrate SRH self-care package for capacity ability to government staff. Encourage those providing self-injection in humanitarian settings to share what their challenges are for continuous provision and how they can better work together with governments to support women and girls choosing this method. Read and know more about Brief My Colleagues in Charge of Self-Care. Excellent. I also like the MSF idea of self-care using misoprostol to prevent PPH. This will do well to reduce MMR in areas where home delivery is high and also those with difficulty in accessing healthcare service post. Work with pharma and retail to make self-care products available in humanitarian settings. Yes, quite important. Support youth to take up the concept of self-care to be useful as mental health care and self-sustainability. Advocacy for inclusion of self-managed abortion in the interagency field manual and MISP. Excellent. Building resilience and capacity. These are really great, and we're going to compile all of these and as I was mentioning, bring them together. So we'll just go to the next slide and just end. Actually, yes. I don't know, Erin, if you want to just unmute yourself and we can kind of close the session together. But yeah, it's just on behalf of from Erin, myself, IRC Vital, as well as the interagency working group. We are so grateful for all of your participation, and you know, this has been really, really a great morning, afternoon, and session. And there's a lot of takeaways that we'll take from this. So thank you very much. Erin, if you want to say some few words.
Just thank you all so much. We look forward to continuing to work with you on this important topic, and have a great rest of your day.
Please be sure to complete the session evaluation form, which I have linked in the chat, and I will share once again. And you can also complete the evaluation form on our platform as well. Thank you.
And also just a quick one, you can still view the posters as well.